Hello and welcome to another episode of LowEndBox TV. This is part 2 of our series on how to set up a highly available WordPress site from scratch. If you didn't see part 1, I'd recommend going back and watching that video first so you understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. Now, as I mentioned in that video, we're going to be using a pair of nodes from Linode. I'm actually logged into both of them here. Just going back and forth there in my browser, and to make it a little bit more obvious what we're doing, I'm going to just go ahead and set my terminal prompt to node 1, and then on the other one we'll set it to, if you're not familiar with that command, ps1 is a variable in bash, which is the shell we're using, which you can use to set the prompt. It's ps1, and whatever you set that to is what your prompt is going to be. So I've set it to node 1 and node 2. And like I said, these are from Linode. These are brand new. I just installed them. These are Debian 10.9 systems, so they're just brand new, fresh installed from the template. Let's go ahead and do some basic setup on these guys and get them ready. Let's see here. I think the first thing I'll do is depackage, reconfigure locales, and we will choose, let's go all the way down here to UTF-8, which is probably already selected, but let's just make sure that's set up. And US UTF-8, obviously. You would change this to whatever is important for you. There we go, generating locales. And I'm going to reconfigure TZ data, which will pick the time zone. I'm in the Pacific, so we're going to say US Pacific Ocean. There we go. All right, and we're going to have to set up Etsy host name here. This will be not, I think this might be a Linodism. I've done this on some other systems, but this one's going to be called node1.lowend.party, which is the domain we're using. We should do an update and apt-get upgrade. This takes a moment for it to go through and update everything. There we go. All right, we've upgraded our system. Everything's up to snuff, and then we're going to install the basic packages that we're going to need here. So apt-get install nginx, MariaDB server, and PHP FPM. We think we also need the PHP MySQL. Good to go. All right, we'll let that cook for a sec as it'll download all that good stuff. Once this is done, we're going to run MySQL secure installation, which is a script you should always run that just turns off some of the more dangerous MySQL defaults. Of course, I'm saying MySQL here, but really it's MariaDB. But MySQL secure installation, and we don't have one, so yeah, we'll set up a root password. There we go, yes, and you can answer yes to all of these questions. All right, now we need to create a database for WordPress. So let's go into MySQL. We'll just create a database. We'll call it something clever like WP, and we'll create a user WP at localhost, identified by, well, we'll just call it complex password. There we go. Obviously, you should use a real complex password, but that's good enough for this tutorial. Grant all on WP to WP at localhost, and then flush privileges. So if you're not familiar with WordPress, let's just walk through this real quick. First, I created a database, a new database called WordPress. Then I created a user, and usually a user in MySQL is the name of the user and then where they're connecting from. So this could be WP at a host name, at an IP address. In this case, we're just going to run MariaDB locally, so it's at localhost. And then this identified by is whatever, where you put in whatever password you want that user to use. In this case, I somewhat tongue-in-cheek used a password called complex password. Obviously, you'd want to use a real password here, something appropriate instead of complex password. Then we want to grant all permissions on the WP database to WP at localhost, and that's what that statement I highlighted did, and then finally we flush privileges. In other words, it's kind of like a commit statement. Not really, it's simply telling MariaDB to take what's in our session and just make sure that is uniformly applied to all sessions. All right, that would complete our database setup here on node 1. Now the next thing I need to do is configure nginx. So first of all, I'm going to create a web location, and the way I typically do this is just create a directory called web, and this is all, you know, in terms of disk and everything, this is all in the same file system, or about the same volume anyways, the same partition, that's the word I'm looking for, dev SDA. So it doesn't really matter where we put this. I'm just going to put it in /web. That's a really easy location to remember. I also want to log, so I'm going to make a directory called var log nginx. That already exists, www.lowend.party, and that is going to be our the domain that we're going to serve. Now I made that web, but maybe I'll have other domains on this, so I'm actually going to make there a web www.lowend.party. Before we continue, I'd like to highlight one of our community advertisers. For over a decade, ServerHub has offered virtual and dedicated servers in 10 different locations in both North America and Europe. They've been celebrated as one of America's fastest growing companies in the Inc. 500, and they operate a global infrastructure platform that utilizes a premium blend of carriers combined with some of the fastest connectivity in the industry. ServerHub's users enjoy managing all of their services through HubGrid, a unified control panel that allows them to seamlessly handle service management, billing, and support functions all in one interface. Next time you're looking for virtual or dedicated servers, check out ServerHub's offers on LowEndTalk or LowEndBox, or visit their site at serverhub.com. Now, I also need to, if I go into var log nginx, I will see that there is that www.lowend.party, but it's owned by root and root. And that's not going to work because we want the web server to be able to write into this. So what we're going to do is say chown minus, actually we can just chown, I can spell it, there we go, chown www.data adm, and yeah, there we go. Oops, there we go. So now the web server will be able to write into www.lowend.party, right? That and the full path there is var log nginx. Now, one other thing we want to do is that right now, if we were to, once we get the web server configured, if we were to fire it up, it would start logging into var log nginx, www.lowend.party, access log, and error log, but those files would just grow endlessly. Fortunately, Debian comes with a built-in system to rotate log files. Let's go take a look at etc log rotate d. And if you look here, you'll see there's a nginx file here. And if I were just to look at that, it's got all these directives on how to rotate these log files. You know, rotate 14, compress, but you can delay the compress, how to set the permissions on those files, etc. I'm not going to go through all this. You can go look at the log rotate man page. But what I want to do is just point something out here. Right now it's going to rotate everything in var log nginx star.log. So var log nginx, sorry, I should just go ahead and alias that because I use it all the time, lsal. All right, let's try that again. So it's going to rotate, yeah, let's go back up here. Okay, so this is the directive. Rotate everything in var log nginx star.log and then apply all of these rules. Well, var log nginx star.log will get this access log here, it'll get this error log, but that's it. It's not going to rotate anything in www.lowend.party. So what I want to do is I'm just going to copy that nginx file to nginx, we'll call it nginx webders, and if I edit that file, all I have to do is just add another star like that. So now it's going to say rotate every star.log file in every subdirectory off of var log nginx, and that's what we want. So now when it runs, it will rotate every .log file here in var log nginx, but it'll also rotate every log file in var log nginx subdirectories, which in this case there's only one, www.lowend.party. So the access log and the error log that go in there will get rotated. All right, that's exactly what we want. Now, let's go set up nginx. So all of nginx's configuration lives here in etc nginx. And the way nginx works, if you're not familiar with it, is you create files in sites available. This is a directory that has kind of a list of all of the different domains that you could enable. And then when you want to turn one on, so to speak, you would link it into sites enabled. So let's go into sites available. And we are going to create a file called www.lowend.party. And I'm going to impress you here with the blazing speed of my typing. Or perhaps you figured out that I'm copy-pasting. So let's just walk through this file real quick. This is very standard nginx language. I'm not going to go into great depth here, but we've got our server name. That's the name that we're serving out to the world. This is our access log. Remember, we created that var log nginx lowend.party subdirectory under var log nginx. Same thing for the error log. This block here, in fact, let's turn on numbering here so I can tell you what I'm talking about. Lines 6 through 12 are how to handle .php files, and we're using PHP FPM, which is a daemon that's running. In fact, let's just do it and show you it. Yeah, there it is running. That is actually parsing and handling all of the PHP files for us. So these parameters here and those that are in etc nginx fast CGI params are parameters that when someone calls a file, when the user's browser tries to access something .php, this is the block that's executed. That's the quote-unquote location. And then down here we have our standard location block. This is the root directory for our www.lowend.party site. It's saying, hey, here's the root. Remember, we set up that web www.lowend.party. Try and index PHP first, and if that doesn't exist, try index.html. And then there's a rewrite rule here. If the request doesn't exist, rewrite it to index PHP, etc. And all that's very appropriate for WordPress. Now, you'll notice I don't have anything in here around HTTPS, right? This is all HTTP stuff. I don't have SSL directives in here, but we will get to that later. We don't need it right at this stage. So let's go now to, you may remember, oops, where am I? Yeah, okay, so I'm in sites available, and you can see I've got that www.lowendparty file there. So now I need to go to sites enabled, and I can link sites available here, and that should pick it up. Now, I want to restart nginx, but usually what I do is I do an nginx-t, and that will go through and see if there's any errors or problems or mistakes or syntax errors in my nginx configuration files. As you can see here, the syntax is okay, the test is okay, so we're good to go. So I can just do a system control restart nginx. Okay, so at this point, this site is up and live on the internet. The only thing I need to do then is to get WordPress itself installed on the system. And all I'm going to do is just go to wordpress.org and download it. Alright, so to get WordPress, I've gone to wordpress.org. I just click here at the top on Get WordPress. And there are several ways to get WordPress, etc., but sometimes tech-savvy folks prefer to download and install it themselves. Well, we are, in fact, tech-savvy folks, so let's download and install it ourselves. And this right here, this download.tar.gz, that's what I want, so let me just copy that link address. So now that I've copied the URL, I'm back on my node here. I'm just going to go over here to web www.lowend.party. There's nothing here, and I can type wget and just paste in that URL. And to be honest with you, for at least 10 years, it's always been https://wordpress.org/latest.tar.gz. So even if you didn't go through the actual work of going to WordPress, navigating and copying that link, if you just type this command, you'll probably get it. So let me go ahead and grab that. Now I'm just going to untar it here. And I believe it puts everything in a /WordPress directory, which is not what I want. I want to move everything in WordPress to here. Did I get everything? Yep. So now I can remove that WordPress directory, and I've got my WordPress installation ready to go. All right, so what I want to do is browse to the WordPress installer, but I have not yet set up in DNS www.lowend.party, because that's ultimately going to be pointing via round-robin DNS to two different nodes. So what I need to do is kind of fool my home PC by kind of giving it a local DNS entry. And the way that I do that, I'm on a Mac here, and I'm going to go into, first of all, I'm actually going to become root here, so sudo su, type in my user password, and I'm going to go into my etc hosts file and create an entry. Now for my node here, let me go back to my IP address. It is right 4579.81.184, so I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to say consider that to be lowend.party. And so on my, once I've saved this, now on my PC, my Mac here, this is, it thinks that lowend.party, www.lowend.party is that DNS address, and that will override any DNS setting that's actually out there in the DNS server for this domain. Now I said I'm on a Mac. If you're on a Windows system, you want to edit C, Windows System 32, drivers, etc hosts, and it's the exact same format here. All you do is create a, you put in the address you want, 4579.81.184 in this situation, and then you put in whatever you want to map to that. And I could put in other maps here. I could call it, maybe just lowend.party or web.lowend.party. I can create as many aliases as I want, but obviously since this is just for setting up WordPress, I just need that one there. So I'll go ahead and save this. And now if I do an ns lookup, let's see here, ns lookup.lowend.party. Yeah, it's going to come back and say, hey, I can't find that because I'm trying to talk to 8.8.8.8, which is Google DNS. On the other hand, if I was to SSH to www.lowend.party, it could find that, right? Because it knows, in fact, there it is. See, www.lowend.party, and there's that IP address, right? So the ns lookup command is saying, talk to the name server, get an answer, and it's saying, hey, it's not in the name server that's configured for the lowendparty.domain doesn't know anything about what you're asking it. But because I've set up that etc hosts, all the normal system utils, including applications like my browser, etc., will be able to find LowEndParty, www.lowendparty, because it'll look in that host file first before it goes to DNS. All right, now there's one more thing that we need to configure here before we go into the WordPress installer that I forgot to do earlier, and that is to set the file system permissions for our web directory. If we go look in web, we'll see that the www.lowend.party directory is owned by root, and if we look in that directory, we see that most of the files are owned by nobody and no group. So we're going to change that. I'm going to make this owned by www.data and ADM for www.lowend.party. Whoops. Sorry, I don't want chmod, I want chown. All right, so those are owned then, and then if I go look in www.lowend.party, what I can do here is say find www.lowend. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Challenge -r www data ADM. That will recursively set the ownership for that directory. And then let's see what we've got in there. Do I need to change? Actually, those look good. I was going to see if I needed to change any of the ownership permissions, but the web server, if you look at nginx, is running as the worker process there, you can see, is running as www-data, and so that should have permissions to write or change whatever we need here, and that'll be important when we do our WordPress configuration, which is what we'll do next. Alright, now I'm sitting at the Chrome browser here on my PC, and I'm just going to go to www.lowend.party. And here we are in our WordPress installer. Very typical. If you've ever installed WordPress, you'll be familiar with this. I'm just going to click continue. And it says, hey, you're going to need some of these things. We're just going to go through this quickly because this really isn't about how to set up WordPress, but we'll just walk through this. Let's go. So my database name, of course, is WP. That's what we chose earlier when we set up MySQL. Username is WP, and of course that famous complex password that we used. Everything else is fine. Submit. Alright, Sparky, you've made it through this part of the installation, so let's go ahead and run the installer. Now, let's pick a site title. How about LowEnd Party? Username would be admin, and I will pick something clever here like LET Rocks. Something like that. This will be changed long before this video goes live, or this site will be offline. So raindog308 at raindog308.com, and I don't need any search engines to index something that's going to be gone here probably before they even come by. And let's go ahead and install WordPress. Don't need to save that, no thanks. And we're good to go. So let's log in. Username admin and my password, which I've already forgotten. .rocks. Log in. No, do not need to save that in 1Password or in the browser. Thank you, thank you. And we're in. So now I could go in here and maybe create a post. Let's do that. Or edit this hello world post. Let's just do that. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, it's all fabulous. Okay. This is LowEnd Party. We're going to say this site exists solely for tutorial purposes. Cool. Now let's update that, and I think that's really all that we're going to need to do at this point. If I was to visit my site, I will now see, yeah, exists just for LowEnd. This is LowEnd Party, exists solely for tutorial purposes. Okay, so at this point we've got WordPress up and running. Obviously it's only running on one node, it's only running on port 80, but we have basic functionality here. Alright, the final thing that we're going to do in this section of the tutorial is to set up node 2 to be a replica of node 1. Now, I didn't want you to have to sit and watch me do all those tedious steps again, so I've done some of the work already. I've done the dpackage reconfigure for the locales, the time zone data. I set the host name. I did apt-get update and apt-get upgrade. I installed nginx, MariaDB, and PHP FPM, and I ran the MySQL secure installation. Oh, and I also created the database. Now we can save some time by copying over some of our stuff from node 1. So I'm going to use rsync for that purpose. I'm going to say rsync avz web to node2.lowend.party and put that in the root directory. Type in my password here, and there it goes. I could use SCP. The problem with SCP is that if you have it does sort of preserve the file ownership, but it takes the ownership of whoever the user is you're logging in as, whereas rsync should keep the, yeah, there we go, keeps the ownership as it is, because we've got the same UID and the same owners on both sides. So that looks good. And then one other file I will want to copy over is in etc nginx. I want to scp sites. Actually, let's do this. A little trick here I'll show you. Sites available. Remember, I've got this lowend party. I want to scp lowend party to node2.lowend.party, and I can do this trick here. pwd, of course, is the present working directory, and by putting it in backticks, when this command is, well, here I can actually show you. Let's turn on our command echoing. When I run this command, it will actually run the pwd command and expand it out, so I don't have to type out etc nginx sites available. There we go. So this is the actual command that it's going to execute. Alright, now let's turn off our command echoing because we don't need to see that. Alright, so I'm over here on node 2, and let's see, I need to create my logging var log nginx www.lowend.party, and I want to change that to be owned by www.data and adm, and then I want to go into etc log rotate d, and I can change, or rather copy nginx to nginx webdrs, and there we go. And just like on the other one, as we discussed, I want it to also work on the subdirectories. In fact, I believe, now that I think about it, I could also just do this. nginx star.log, and that way it would apply those rules to both. So let's get rid of that nginx webdrs on this one. I won't bother going back and doing it on the other one, but that one just occurred to me that I can, you can actually have multiple paths here, and it says, hey, just apply these rules to everything that is on these paths. Okay, cool. So we've got logging set up. Now I just need to go to etc nginx sites available, and actually go to sites enabled. Link in my sites available lowend party. Link that there. And then I could do an nginx. Yep, everything looks good. System control, restart nginx. And the restart here just says go out, reread your config files, and restart nginx. So that site should now be live. Now I'm going to go to back to node 1. I got one more thing to do. Go to the temp directory here and do a MySQL dump of the WordPress directory, I'm sorry, the WordPress database, and put that into temp wp.sql. If you've worked with MySQL, I'm sure you're familiar with MySQL dump, but just briefly what that does is it creates a file here, and in SQL, the double dash here at the start is a comment. This is a comment as well. But it has all of the commands necessary to recreate that database. So when I execute this file, it will actually go through and recreate everything that's in my database. So let's see here. I need to copy this over. Copy this to node2.lowend.party. Put that in the temp directory. And then over here on node 2, all I need to do is say MySQL WordPress database and read in that file. Or in other words, take as your input to the MySQL command this file. Great. So now I've got that database restored on node 2. So at this point, what I've got is I've got WordPress up and running on 2 sites. They've got the exact same content. Of course, they're not being kept in sync. So if I went into site on node 1 and added some stuff, it would not yet get to node 2. If this was a purely static website, we'd be done, really. We'd just set up round robin DNS and be done with it. But obviously we want to, since WordPress is a dynamic system, we want both the database and the web file system where the uploads and the images, etc. are stored. We want to keep those in sync. So in our next tutorial, we'll look at getting the database into sync. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to come visit us at LowEndBox or LowEndTalk.com, where you'll find the best deals in the hosting industry, fantastic technical content, thoughts and opinions from industry leaders, and very spirited discussion. Until next time, happy hosting.